My mother opened the front door, looked at my face, and screamed. Not because something bad had happened. Because she thought something bad had happened to me. 14 months ago. She had grieved me. She had accepted condolences. She had stopped setting my place at the table. And I was standing on her porch. Alive. Holding my car keys. My sister had told our entire family. Our parents, our aunt, our cousins. The family attorney. The administrator of our grandmother's $870,000 trust fund. That I was dead. Gone. Some vague accident in the Pacific Northwest. No body. No closure. Just, Nadia is gone. The whole time? I was 12 miles away. Buying groceries. Feeding my cat. Completely unreachable because nobody thought to actually look. She didn't do it out of grief. She did it because my share of that trust was worth $290,000. And she almost got away with it. Hit subscribe, drop your city and time in the comments below. I want witnesses for this one. Let me take you back. My name is Nadia. I am 34 years old. And I was raised in Clover Ridge. A mid-sized suburb about 40 minutes outside of Columbus, Ohio. My parents, Dale and Renata Howell, are both retired school teachers. My father taught high school history for 27 years. My mother taught 4th grade English. They are decent, quiet, hard-working people. Who believed in 3 things above everything else. Church on Sunday. A hot meal at 6 o'clock. And keeping family business inside the family. That last one matters. Remember it. My sister's name is Celeste. She is 4 years older than me. Which would make her 38 now. Growing up, Celeste was everything I was not. She was confident where I was shy. She was loud where I was quiet. She made friends without trying, laughed at everything. Filled every room she walked into. My parents adored her. The neighbors adored her. Teachers adored her. I was the afterthought. The younger one who read too many books. And spent too much time in her own head. I want to be careful here. I have spent a lot of years in therapy. Working through the language I use about my childhood. I don't want to say Celeste was cruel to me. That is not quite right. She wasn't the kind of sister who hit me. Or screamed at me. Or locked me out of the house. What she was. And I think she was calculated about it even then. Was dismissive. She made me small. She did it with a smile. She would speak over me at dinner. She would tell my friends stories about me. That were technically true. But framed in a way that made everyone laugh at my expense. She would borrow my things without asking. And return them broken, or not at all. And if I complained, my parents would say, Nadia. She's your sister. Let it go. Let it go. I heard that phrase so often growing up. That I internalized it as a personal philosophy. I let things go. I let Celeste go first in everything. First to get her own room when we moved houses. First to get a car. First to get a cell phone. By the time I got those things, it felt less like receiving a gift. And more like accepting a handoff. Used goods, passed down from Celeste's life into mine. I don't blame my parents entirely for this. They were not bad people. They were tired people. 2 teachers, raising 2 daughters on 2 teacher salaries. Trying to keep the peace in a 3-bedroom house. Celeste was easier to give things to because Celeste asked louder. I learned early that asking quietly got you nothing. So eventually, I stopped asking at all. I got through high school on good grades and a library card. I got a partial scholarship to Ohio State. Took out loans for the rest. And studied communications. Celeste had gone to a smaller school in Pennsylvania. paid for in full by our parents, which I didn't fully understand at the time, and came back to Clover Ridge after 2 years without finishing her degree. By the time I was finishing mine, Celeste was working at a local real estate office, dating a man named Marcus, who drove a loud truck and told the same 3 jokes every time I saw him. She was slowly, carefully, making herself the center of our family's world again. I graduated, got a job at a marketing firm in Columbus, rented an apartment in a neighborhood called the Short North. I was 23 years old, independent, proud of myself in a way I had never quite been before. I called my parents on Sundays. I came home for holidays. I had a life. And then my grandmother died. And everything changed. My grandmother on my father's side, Dorothy Howell, though everyone called her Dot, was a remarkable woman. She had grown up poor in rural Kentucky, moved north as a young woman, married my grandfather Harold, and over 50 years of extremely careful living, she had quietly accumulated significant wealth. Not the kind of wealth you would guess from looking at her. She drove a 2003 Toyota Camry until she was 81. She cut coupons until the year she died. She shopped sales like it was a competitive sport. But Harold had been in manufacturing. He had invested wisely. He had owned a small commercial property in Columbus that had appreciated dramatically over the decades. When he died in 2009, he left everything to Dot. And when Dot died in November of 2019, she was 86 years old. She passed peacefully in her sleep, which was the only kind of ending fitting for a woman that gentle. She left an estate worth approximately $1.4 million. The will was straightforward. My father was her only surviving child. He received the house and the commercial property outright. The remaining liquid assets, after taxes and estate fees, came to roughly $870,000. Those were placed in a trust. The trust was divided into 3 equal parts. 1/3 to my father, 1/3 to Celeste, 1/3 to me. Each share came to approximately $290,000. There was one condition Grandma Dorothy had written in, with very specific language. And this is the part that matters. The trust would not distribute until 2 years after her death, meaning November of 2021. Her attorney, a man named Gerald Fitch, who had handled her affairs for 30 years, was the administrator. The delay was intentional. Grandma Dorothy had told my father years earlier that she wanted to make sure any beneficiary claiming funds was still alive and in a stable situation. She had seen too many families torn apart by sudden money. The waiting period was her way of protecting us. 2 years. November 2021. When she died, I cried for 3 days. Not about the money. About her. She was the one person in my family who had always seen me clearly, who would sit with me in her kitchen and ask me real questions and listen to real answers. Losing her hurt in a way that didn't have language. I want you to sit with that for a second. A woman who loved me enough to leave me 1/3 of almost $900,000. And someone in my own family decided that was something worth stealing. The year 2020 was hard for everyone. I don't need to explain that. My marketing job went remote, which suited me fine. I was working well, staying healthy, spending a lot of time alone in my apartment. I wasn't calling home as often as I used to. Maybe once a month. Maybe less. My parents and I had always been cordial rather than close. In the way of adult children who have moved on, we had settled into a comfortable distance. In early 2021, I made a decision I have played over in my mind 1,000 times since. I gave up my lease in the Short North. Rent had gone up. My company had announced permanent remote work. And a college friend named Priya was moving to Crestfield, a suburb on the east side of Columbus, and had a 2-bedroom house she was renting. She wanted a roommate. Crestfield was quiet and affordable, and 12 miles from my parents' house in Clover Ridge. I moved in March of 2021. And here is where I made my critical mistake. I did not tell my parents I was moving. I know how that sounds. But let me explain the texture of our relationship. My parents didn't visit me in Columbus. We didn't do that. I went to them for holidays. They didn't come to my apartment. I hadn't had them over in 4 years. My mother called on Sunday mornings. And we talked about her garden and my work. And whether I was eating enough. I did not share my address with her in the way that a person would think to. Because it had never come up. She wrote me letters occasionally. Actual paper letters, because she was that generation. And I had a P.O. box in the short north that I had held on to even after moving. I was still collecting mail from it every few weeks. The idea that she would need to know I had moved 12 miles away did not register as urgent. I was going to tell them. I was absolutely going to tell them. I just hadn't gotten around to it yet. And in that gap, that lazy, ordinary, completely human gap of I'll mention it next time, my sister built a lie so elaborate. It took 14 months to fully collapse. If something like this has ever happened to you, a family member keeping a secret that cost you something real, drop a comment right now. You are not alone. I need to tell you this slowly. Because even now, even after all of it, the sheer architecture of what she constructed still takes my breath away. It started, as best I can reconstruct it, in late April of 2021. That is when Celeste called our parents. My father specifically. And told him she had been trying to reach me. That my phone seemed to be disconnected. That she had driven by my old apartment. And a new person answered the door. She planted the seed of concern without saying anything alarming. Just a daughter checking in. Just a sister trying to make sure. My parents tried my number. But here is the thing. I had changed carriers in February and had a new number. I had texted it to my mother from my new phone. I was almost certain I had. But looking back, I think I might have sent it to her old number. The one she had before she upgraded her phone in January. She never received it. She thought she had the right number, but had been texting into the void for months. And assumed I was just bad at responding. Which, honestly, was not out of character for me. So my parents tried my old number. Disconnected. They wrote to my P.O. box. The P.O. box, because I hadn't been in the area. Had not been checked in 8 weeks. And was in the process of being deactivated for non-renewal. The letter came back undeliverable. Celeste was watching all of this happen. She was feeding it. When my parents began to worry, she escalated. In June of 2021, she told them she had hired a private investigator. She showed them a document, which I later learned was fabricated, assembled from templates she had found online, that purported to show a search for my name in Oregon. She told them the investigator had found records, suggesting I had traveled to Portland in the spring, that there had been a gap in my financial activity, that I had not responded to any attempts at contact. She did not say I was dead. Not yet. She was too smart for that. She said she was worried. She cried. She held my mother's hand at the kitchen table. And said she was scared she had lost her little sister. My parents, who had raised us to keep family business inside the family, did not call the police. They did not file a missing persons report. They grieved quietly. And they trusted Celeste. Because Celeste was there. And I was not. By August of 2021, Celeste had shifted the narrative. She told them she had received information through the investigator that there had been an accident. A hiking incident in the Cascade Range. No body recovered. The kind of accident that doesn't always have a clear ending. She was careful not to produce a death certificate, because she knew that would be verifiable. Instead, she let my parents live in ambiguity. She let them mourn without closure. And if you know grief at all, you know that is the cruelest kind. She then turned her attention to Gerald Fitch. This is where it gets clinical. This is where you see that what Celeste did was not a crime of passion. It was planned. Gerald Fitch was in his early 70s. Semi-retired. Handling Grandma Dorothy's estate more or less as a courtesy to a family he had known for decades. He was not a suspicious man. He was not a meticulous man. He was a kind, trusting, slightly overworked administrator who had been told by his client's granddaughter, a woman he had met at the funeral, a woman who cried beautifully and brought him a tin of homemade cookies, that there had been a tragedy. Celeste told Gerald that I had died in an accident in Oregon. She told him that the family had been unable to recover remains or obtain a formal death certificate due to the nature of the accident, but that the family had accepted my death and was grieving. She asked what could be done about my share of the trust, given the approaching distribution date in November. Gerald, bless him, did not simply hand her the money. He wasn't that reckless. What he did was consult with Celeste about options for restructuring the distribution. Given an unverified death, he placed my share in a suspended status, meaning it would not distribute in November as scheduled, but would remain in the trust pending documentation. He told Celeste he would need, at minimum, a sworn affidavit from next of kin attesting to the death, and ideally some form of official documentation within a reasonable timeframe. Celeste provided the affidavit. She had my father sign it. My father. My heartbroken, grieving, trusting, fundamentally decent father signed a legal document stating that his younger daughter was dead because his older daughter told him it was a formality, that it was just paperwork so the estate could be properly managed, that it was what Grandma Dorothy would have wanted. He signed it at the kitchen table, probably with a cup of coffee getting cold next to him, probably with Celeste's hand on his shoulder. I have thought about that moment more than almost any other moment in this story. Because my father is not a bad man. He was a broken man who trusted the wrong person. The distribution was restructured. Celeste was to receive her share, $290,000. In November 2021 as planned. My father's share was placed in an additional holding structure. For tax reasons Celeste had conveniently arranged. And my share was to be absorbed, after a probate equivalent waiting period, into the general trust remainder, which would eventually flow to the remaining named beneficiaries. Meaning Celeste. She was patient. She was going to wait. She was going to get my $290,000 eventually. Legally, on paper. Through a document my own father had signed. All she needed was time. She almost made it. I want to tell you about Priya, my roommate, because she is the reason I am sitting here telling you this story. Instead of living in a world where my sister successfully erased me, Priya Menon had been my friend since our sophomore year of college. We were assigned to the same group project in a communications course and stayed up until 3 a.m, arguing about the best way to structure a presentation. She was precise, funny, relentlessly organized, and constitutionally incapable of letting things go uncorrected. She was the kind of woman who would email a restaurant to let them know their hours on their website were wrong. Not out of complaint, but because inaccurate information bothered her on a spiritual level. In September of 2021, Priya mentioned, almost in passing, that she had run into someone at the coffee shop near our house who had gone to our college. An acquaintance named Daniel, who was from Clover Ridge. He asked about you, Priya said. He said he heard something happened to you. Something in Oregon. I looked at her. I've never been to Oregon. Priya put down her mug. That's what I thought. Daniel had heard it from his mother, who was friends with my aunt, my father's sister, Patricia. Patricia had heard it from my parents. My parents had heard it from Celeste. The story had leaked out of the family circle into the broader community of Clover Ridge. People my parents had known for 30 years believed I was dead. They had sent condolence cards to my parents' house. My mother had been receiving casseroles. I sat with that information for about 4 minutes. Then I got in my car. I drove to my parents' house. I had not been there since the previous Christmas. Nearly 10 months earlier. I had been meaning to call. I had been meaning to visit. I had been meaning to explain that I had moved. That I had a new number. That I was fine and happy and 12 miles away. I had been meaning to do a lot of things. I pulled into the driveway. Walked up the front path. And rang the doorbell. Because it felt strange to just walk in after so long. My mother answered the door. I have described this moment to my therapist. To the attorney who later represented me. To the police detective who took my statement. Each time, I try to find the right words for my mother's face. And each time I fall short. It was not simply shock. It was something more profound than shock. It was a woman's entire understanding of reality, being restructured in the span of 3 seconds. Her mouth opened. Her hand went to her chest. She made a sound I don't think I can describe. Not a scream, not a cry. Something between the two. Something animal and raw. That I had never heard from her before. She grabbed me. She grabbed me so hard I could feel her nails through my shirt. She was shaking. She was saying my name over and over. Nadia. 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 Like she was testing whether the word still worked. My father came into the hallway from the kitchen. He saw me. And grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. He was a man of enormous restraint, my father. He did not cry easily or often. He sat down on the floor of his own hallway. And wept. I sat down next to him. I held his hand. I told him I was alive. I told him I was fine. I told him I had been in Crestfield the whole time. And then I said, very quietly, I need you to tell me everything Celeste told you. Comment below right now. Are you watching this alone or with someone? Because this next part is going to be a lot. It took about 2 hours to get the full story out of my parents. My mother kept stopping to cry. My father kept apologizing. For every detail that came out. I had to work to stay calm. To keep my voice even. To hold on to the part of myself that understood. These were 2 people who had been manipulated as badly as I had. The affidavit. The fabricated investigator's report. The story about Oregon. All of it came out slowly. Like water through cracked concrete. When my father mentioned signing the affidavit. When he pulled out a copy he had kept in a folder in his desk. The way a diligent man keeps paperwork. I had to excuse myself and go to the bathroom for a few minutes. I sat on the edge of the tub and I breathed. I thought about Celeste. I thought about the last time I had seen her. At Christmas, the previous year. Sitting across the table from me. Passing the sweet potatoes with both hands. And asking me cheerfully how work was going. She had known even then. She had probably already started building it by then. She had sat across from me. And looked me in the eyes and smiled. And she had already decided to make me disappear. I went back out and sat down with my parents. And I asked the question I needed to ask. Does Celeste know about the trust? What Gerald Fitch is holding? My father looked confused. She handles all of that. She said she'd manage the paperwork. Since things were so complicated with your situation. My situation, I said. And I kept my voice flat, which took everything I had. Dad. She told you I was dead so she could take my inheritance. The silence that followed that sentence was the longest of my life. My mother said, no. Not like a denial. Like a prayer. My father didn't say anything. He looked at the folder in his hands. He opened it. He looked at his own signature on the affidavit. And I watched my father. A man who had spent 27 years teaching teenagers about the moral weight of history. Understand what he had put his name on. I called Gerald Fitch's office the next morning. I got his assistant. And told her I needed an urgent appointment. Regarding the Dorothy Howell Trust. And that the matter concerned a significant error. In the beneficiary status documentation. I was calm. I was polite. I had my driver's license. My social security card. My lease agreement showing I had been in Crestfield since March. My utility bills. My employment records. 3 months of bank statements. I had all of this in a folder. Because I had spent the night before not sleeping. Just organizing documents. Which is apparently how I cope with the worst things in my life. Gerald Fitch met with me 2 days later. I sat across from him. Put my folder on his desk. And told him I was Nadia Howell. I was alive. And I had some concerns about my trust distribution. The man went the color of old paper. He pulled out his files. He looked at the affidavit with my father's signature. He looked at my driver's license. He looked at the affidavit again. Then he looked at me for a long moment. And said, Miss Howell. I need to make some calls. He made those calls. I sat in his waiting room for an hour and 40 minutes. Drinking terrible office coffee. Reading a framed print about the importance of integrity in estate planning. That had never previously been more contextually relevant. Gerald's assessment, delivered to me later that afternoon, was measured and precise. Celeste had not yet received my share of the trust. My share had been suspended. Pending probate equivalent documentation of death. Which had not yet been formally completed. Celeste's own $290,000 distribution had been processed in November 2021 as scheduled. But my $290,000 had not moved. It was still there. It was still mine. All she had managed to steal, at that point, was time. And she had given me something in return. Evidence. I am going to walk you through what happened next. But I want to preface it with something important. I am not a lawyer. I did not handle this myself. I found a lawyer. Her name was Karen Osei. She was one of the sharpest people I have ever met. And she handled this with a calm efficiency I could only aspire to. Karen filed a formal challenge to the fraudulent death declaration within a week. She contacted the county probate court. And filed documentation establishing my living status. She froze any further activity on the trust. Pending a full legal review. She also, and this is the part that still makes my chest feel tight, filed a police report. Because what Celeste had done was not a family disagreement. It was not a misunderstanding. It was fraud. Fraud of multiple kinds. Filing a false legal affidavit. Providing false information to an estate administrator. Potentially causing my father to commit perjury. By signing a sworn statement she had coached him through. Karen was careful and thorough. She laid out for me, in clear language, what the charges could look like. Celeste was contacted by the police in late October of 2021. She did not crumble immediately. Celeste was not the kind of person who crumbled. She initially claimed she had genuinely believed I was dead. That the investigator had told her so. That she had been acting in good faith. That this was all a terrible misunderstanding. She cried. She was very convincing. She had been very convincing her entire life. But the investigator she had named did not exist. The document she had shown my parents was fabricated. The detective who reviewed it identified font inconsistencies and formatting errors within an hour. The paper trail of her communications with Gerald Fitch showed a calculated, months-long pattern of providing information she knew to be false. She had been lying. Deliberately. For over a year. When that became clear to the police, the charges moved forward. Celeste was charged with fraudulent misrepresentation, filing a false legal document, and attempted fraud. The attempted fraud charge carried the most weight, legally. My father, who had signed the affidavit, was interviewed extensively. Karen worked with the investigators to establish that he had been deceived by Celeste. That he had signed the document without understanding its full implications. That he had no independent knowledge of or contact with the investigator or the Oregon story. He cooperated fully. It was one of the hardest things he has ever done. I will not pretend it was simple or clean. My father had to live with the fact that his signature was on that document. He has had to live with that every day since. I have forgiven him. I want to say that clearly. I have forgiven my father completely. Because I watched what it cost him. And I believe with my whole heart that he did not understand what he was signing. He is a trusting man who was manipulated by someone he loved. That is not a crime. It is a tragedy. Celeste eventually entered a negotiated plea. She pled guilty to fraudulent misrepresentation and 1 count of attempted fraud. She served 8 months in a county facility, completed 2 years of supervised probation, and was ordered to pay $40,000 in legal fees and court costs. My share of the trust was released to me in full, minus my own legal fees. Karen was excellent, and excellent attorneys are not free. I received approximately $261,000. The $290,000 Celeste had received, as her own legitimate distribution, was not ordered returned, as it had been a valid distribution at the time. The court noted this with what I can only describe as legal frustration. She kept her money. I kept mine. And the distance between us became something no trust fund could have measured. I want to stop the chronology here for a moment. Because there is something I have been thinking about for 3 years. That I have never quite articulated anywhere outside of therapy. And I think it matters. When something like this happens to you, people assume the hardest part is the dramatic stuff. The police report. The courtroom. The moment you find out. And those things are hard. Genuinely. Standing in Gerald Fitch's waiting room. Knowing my sister had declared me legally dead, yes. That is hard. Watching my father cry on his own hallway floor, yes. That is hard. But the hardest part. The part that lingers and aches. And does not go away. Simply because the legal machinery resolved correctly. Is the smallness of it. What I mean is this. I was not taken to a foreign country. I was not in a coma. I was not missing. I was 12 miles away. I was at the Target on Bexley Road buying paper towels. I was at the Saturday farmers market getting tomatoes. I was on the same exit off I-70 that my parents had driven past 40 times. My life was completely ordinary. Completely nearby. And completely invisible. To the people who were supposed to love me. Because one person had decided to make it so. The lie worked because it required so little infrastructure. My number had changed. My P.O. box had lapsed. I had been slow and casual about updating my address. Celeste didn't need to build an elaborate scheme to erase me. She just needed to fill the silence that I had already, unwittingly, created. She handed my family a story. And they stepped into it. The way you step into a room someone else has already furnished. They didn't ask enough questions because they trusted her. And they didn't trust me enough to ask in the first place. That sentence took me a long time to arrive at. It cost me a lot of therapy hours. And I am saying it out loud now. Because I think it is important and true. They did not trust me enough to ask in the first place. They did not call the police. They did not hire an actual investigator. They did not do what any reasonable person who believes their child might be missing should do. They grieved quietly. And kept it inside the family. The way they had always kept everything inside the family. And Celeste knew they would. She had grown up in the same house. She knew exactly how much they would question her. And how much they would not. She built the lie to fit my family shape. That is the part one keep coming back to. Not the betrayal of Celeste. Though that is enormous, that is its own wound. But the way the lie fits so perfectly. Because it was designed by someone who knew us. Who knew that my parents wouldn't make noise. Who knew that I wouldn't notice quickly because I was already distant. Who knew that the family attorney was elderly and trusting. Who knew that the waiting period on the trust gave her a window. She knew all of this. Because she had been watching my family with clear eyes for 38 years. Knowing someone deeply is supposed to be an act of love. Celeste turned it into a blueprint. Take a breath. If you're watching this with someone, squeeze their hand. If you're watching alone, go get a glass of water. I'll be right here. I am often asked about my parents. How we navigated what happened after. The honest answer is, slowly. Imperfectly. And with professional help. My mother fell apart in a way that surprised me. She had always been the contained one, the composed one. But the guilt of what she had allowed to happen, even unknowingly, hit her in a way that she had no resources for. She had buried a child. She had grieved me. She had received casseroles. And then the child walked in the front door. And she had to hold both of those realities at the same time. The grief and the living. While also reckoning with the fact that her older daughter had manufactured the whole thing. She started seeing a therapist in January of 2022. I remember feeling something complicated when my father told me. Relief that she was getting help. And something I am not proud of. A flash of anger. That it took her own crisis to take therapy seriously. When I had been in therapy for years. Trying to process a childhood that had made me feel invisible. But I let that go. Because she was trying. Because she was in that chair, doing the work. That counts for something. My father was quieter about his process. The way he was quiet about most things. He stopped going to the same church that Celeste had attended. Which was a significant act. For a man who had been in the same congregation for 20 years. He called me every Sunday morning. Not the way we used to talk. Surface level, 15 minutes. But really called. He would ask about my week and mean it. He would tell me things he was thinking about. We built a different kind of relationship. In the space where the old one had failed us both. I will not tell you it was easy. There were conversations that went badly. There were holidays that were so strange and heavy with absence. That we sat at the table not quite knowing what to say. There is still a Christmas ornament on my parents' tree. With Celeste's name on it in gold glitter. That my mother cannot bring herself to remove. And cannot bring herself to hang. It sits in a box in the storage closet. And every December, I think about it. And I do not say anything. Because it is not my grief to manage. I love my parents. I believe they love me. I believe they always did. I think love, without attention, can become inert. Can exist in the same space as neglect. Without anyone intending it. I think my family loved me in the abstract. While Celeste made me disappear in the specific. And the specific is where life actually happens. We are learning the specific. All three of us, 3 years on. It is a process. It is not finished. I have been asked many times whether I have spoken to Celeste since. Whether I plan to. Whether I have forgiven her. I spoke to her once. It was 2 months after her plea. My parents had, with enormous complexity and pain, maintained some contact with her. She was still their daughter. At one point during a conversation with my mother, Celeste asked if she could speak to me. I said yes. We spoke on the phone for 11 minutes. I timed it afterward. Because I had a feeling I would want to remember the shape of it. She started by saying she was sorry. The word sorry. Thin and insufficient like a paper umbrella in a rainstorm. I asked her, not angrily, but honestly, why? Not why did you do it in the sense of what were you thinking? I already knew what she was thinking. She was thinking about $290,000. I asked why in the deeper sense. Why me? Why was it so easy to make me disappear? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You always seemed fine." I turned that over in my mind for months. You always seemed fine. She watched me from across our entire childhood. And what she saw was a person who seemed fine. And she concluded that fine did not require protecting. That fine was available for leverage. That fine. Being not urgent, being not loud, being not present. Could be quietly removed from the picture. And the picture would hold together. She was wrong. The picture did not hold together. It shattered. But I understood, finally, what I had spent my whole life being. The one who could be ignored because she seemed fine. The one whose absence could be explained. The one who had made herself so small that someone else could simply narrate her out of existence. I am not fine with that anymore. I am many things. I am alive. I am in Crestfield. I have a cat named Theo. And a good friend in Priya. And a job I am good at. And a therapist I trust. And a father who calls me on Sunday mornings. And means every word he says. I have $261,000 in an account. That belonged to a woman who loved me and wanted me to have it. I have a story I am finally willing to tell. I am not fine. I am whole. Which is entirely different. Celeste and I have not spoken since that 11-minute call. I do not know if we ever will. I am not going to perform forgiveness for the internet. Or for my family. Or for her. What I have is something quieter than forgiveness and more honest. I have decided not to carry her. I put her down. She is not my burden anymore. Whether I pick her back up one day is a question I have left open. And I am not in a hurry to close it. I have been thinking about what to say here for a long time. This is not a story with a clean lesson. Life doesn't do clean lessons. But I have some things that are true. And I will give them to you straight. First, silence is not safety. I thought that being quiet, being easy, making myself small, not asking for things. I thought that was how you got through. It was how I got through childhood. But as an adult, that silence became the space where a lie could live. My absence from my family's daily attention was not neutral. It was a gap. And gaps get filled with whatever someone decides to pour into them. I should have called more. I should have sent the new address. Not because I owed it, but because connection requires maintenance. and I had stopped doing the maintenance. Second, grief is an emergency. When my parents believed I was dead, the correct response was to treat it like an emergency. A missing person report. A real investigator. Contact with my workplace. Contact with my friends. They did none of these things. Because Celeste managed the process. And because they kept it inside the family. Please hear me. If someone you love goes missing, truly unreachable, that is not a private family matter. That is a police matter. That is a public matter. The instinct to keep tragedy quiet can be the mechanism by which tragedy becomes permanent. Third, the people who exploit you are not strangers. We teach children about strangers. We talk about people who don't know you trying to take from you. We don't talk enough about what happens when the person who knows you best decides to use that knowledge against you. Celeste's plan worked. Because she understood my family better than any stranger could. She knew our silences and our habits. And our trusting natures. And our tendency to keep things quiet. Intimacy is not automatically protection. Sometimes it is the exact opposite. Fourth, paper matters. Documents matter. Gerald Fitch, despite being manipulated, had not processed the fraudulent disbursement. Because he had not received formal documentation. My $290,000 was still there. Because the system, imperfect as it was, required more than just a story. Grandma Dorothy's insistence on that 2-year waiting period, which had seemed old-fashioned when she wrote it, turned out to be the thing that saved me. Know what documents govern your financial life. Know who holds them. Know what is required to change them. And finally, being the easy one is not a virtue. I spent 30 years being the one who let it go. The one who made peace. The one who didn't ask for too much. Didn't take up too much space. Didn't make anyone uncomfortable. I thought that was being good. It was not being good. It was being absent. It was making myself so low maintenance that I required no attention. And therefore received none. And therefore could be erased. Without too much inconvenience to anyone. I am done being easy. I take up space now. I ask for things. I tell people when something matters to me. I call my parents. And I tell them specifically what is happening in my life. And I ask them specifically what is happening in theirs. I am present. I am loud when I need to be loud. I am here. 12 miles was always close enough to come home. I just needed someone to notice the door was open. So that is the story. That is all of it. Laid out as honestly as I know how to tell it. My grandmother left me $290,000. Because she loved me and wanted me to be taken care of. My sister tried to take it by making me disappear. And for 14 months she almost succeeded. And I was 12 miles away the entire time. Living my ordinary, unremarkable, completely alive life. Going to the Target on Bexley Road. Getting tomatoes on Saturday mornings. Paying my electric bill. The trust distributed in January of 2022. After all legal matters were resolved, I used a portion of it to pay off my student loans. The ones my parents could not help me with. The way they helped Celeste. I put a significant amount in a long-term investment account. The kind Grandma Dorothy would have approved of. And I donated $5,000 to a legal aid organization that helps people who cannot afford attorneys in estate disputes. Because Karen Osei saved my financial life. And not everyone can afford a Karen Osei. And that is a problem worth trying to solve. I still live in Crestfield. Priya and I still share the house. Though she is talking about buying her own place next year. Which fills me with the specific fondness adjacent grief of watching a good friend grow. Theo the cat is 8 years old and has strong opinions about breakfast timing. I am okay. I am more than okay. I am building something. Slowly. With the materials I have. That is all any of us can do. If this story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen, or angry, or like you needed to call someone you haven't called in a while, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment. Tell me your city. Tell me your time. Tell me if you have ever been the one who seemed fine while someone else told your story for you. Because I have a feeling I am not the only one. And I have one question I want to leave you with. Is there someone in your life right now? Someone you love? Who has gone quiet? Who you have been meaning to check on? Meaning to call? Meaning to visit? Not because you think something dramatic is happening. Just because you have let the ordinary business of your life put distance between you and them? Call them. Today. Not tomorrow. Today. Not because something bad is happening. Just because they are alive. And so are you. And that is worth something. That is worth more than we usually act like it is. Thank you for being here. Subscribe if you haven't already. There are more stories where this one came from. And I am only now learning how to tell them. Hit the notification bell. Share this with someone who needs it. And take care of the people you love. Even when. Especially when. They seem fine.